Our guest today is Neboysa Omcikus. He joins us from San Francisco. Neboysa started his career at Rubrik. He was one of the first 15 employees. He came in as the head of talent and subsequently helped them scale to well over 200 people. Rubrik IPO'd on the New York Stock Exchange last year for $3 billion. They're now worth close to $20 billion. That was a while ago. He has since joined Glean, and he is in his 6th year over at Glean and sits currently as their head of strategy. This is one of the most talked about startups in the AI world currently in technology. And the conversation today is really going to be about his journey from talent over to product, now sitting in strategy with a big focus on team building and all the lessons he learned along the way. Neboysa, welcome on.
Thank you, Seb. Excited to be here.
Neboysa, what is your one non-negotiable when it comes to letting people into your inner circle, maybe your direct team, or just when recruiting for Glean in general?
Yeah. So one thing that probably surprises most people is I'm actually quite introverted in the classic sense of it. So like being around a lot of people fatigues me. So I look for people that give me an energy. Like after I've spent time with them, do I feel really energized? And especially the people that are closest to me, whether it's just friends and hanging out or, something beyond that, people to learn from. Like, do I leave that one-on-one conversation, that small group interaction? Do I feel really energized? I feel quite comfortable being alone. I don't have like a need to be around people constantly. So then I can kind of step back and say like, do I feel good about the time that I spent with that person? I think maybe that's the biggest thing that I look for in who I spend my time with.
Yeah, I think one of the more kind of tired phrases that you hear in sales all the time is people will never remember what you said. They'll remember how you made them feel. We say that a lot in our office, right?
Maya Angelou said that.
Okay.
That's a great one.
I should know that. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. When it comes to, I suppose, interviewing people, or perhaps when you kind of first meet people, you talk about energy. Is there anything specific? Is it charisma? Is it sort of a way that they engage with other people around them? Talk to me more about that.
It's curiosity. Like, are they asking interesting questions? Do they think before they speak? Are they intentional? Are they just talking to fill the space because they want to say something and hope it hits? Or are they a person where I'm like, okay, they've really thought through things. They brought something interesting. Like when I interview people, actually, the first thing I like to do before I start asking them questions is say, I'm going to give you a chance to ask me some questions. Right? Do they ask me boring, generic things like, what's the seniority of this role? Or do they ask me questions on like, okay, this person has tried to process what we do as a company. They try to tie it to what they know. They're trying to put some pieces together, right? So those are, that's one thing that I definitely look for.
For sure. And, as someone in recruiting, like you have the generic research that you might do. And I guess what I'm hearing is it's like they've discovered something about your business or maybe about you specifically. And it's almost like they're on the edge of their seat being like, I really need to know more about this because it's bugging me. And like, can we talk about this right away? And like it's beyond just your basic kind of cocktail party research. It's more of like almost like the beginning of like a passion to learn about a specific thing that you might be doing.
Yeah, because building a startup is so tough. Like one of the big things I look for is like, is this person going to stay passionate about it? Is it more than just a job to them? And I think one way that shows up is, do they really spend the time to think about, what Glean is doing, or whatever whoever they might be talking to. So that curiosity, that just passion to try to figure things out, I think it shows up in how you approach those moments. Those are actually the other, So those are some of the other things, like curiosity, passion, like that stuff shows up in how you approach it, how you prep, how you talk to, whoever that person is on the other side.
For sure. And I think when it's like you're judging someone from their energy, it's really tricky because it's, for someone myself who's obsessed with structure, it's very hard to scorecard someone's energy. So I think that's a nice little segue here to sort of my next question. So I've got a quote. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We've created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. I think that was maybe Isaac Newton or someone like that.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, Talk to me about intuition. How important is intuition when it comes to hiring and bringing people on?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I personally think, and just going back to that quote, I think that's so powerful. I see that all the time where sometimes like intuition gets disregarded nowadays, even though it's such a powerful thing that's not always well understood. The person that I learned most from or about recruiting from was this guy Bipple. He's the CEO at Rubrik, and he was the first recruiter before me. And even while I was there, I learned so much. And he really he had great intuition, and he had this ability to somehow just ask people the types of questions where it would reveal things like that internal motivation, the hunger, just people who might have been overlooked for one reason or another and were just so hungry to do something great. And that doesn't always show up in the structure. It's kind of a thing you can feel from how someone talks, just about the decisions that they made, the reasons that they did things. And so that's what I typically think about when it comes to intuition, is like, I try to be a bit like a sponge, let someone talk. And I can't always explain it, but you're trying your best to gauge whether this person is a bullshitter and they interview well, or they're just like, I need this opportunity. I'm going to show you how, that I can do something great with it.
For sure. I think that from someone who speaks to loads of salespeople, there are so many people where you come away from it and you're like, I look at their resume, I can't believe they've jumped around so much. This person seems like, very, very competent, very good at their job. They're very natural at sales. And I've made that mistake in hiring that person a few times, for sure. What system, or perhaps what maybe like guiding principle helps you when looking for that sort of authenticity, the energy that you think is going to really sort of help grow your team or get you to that next goal, and perhaps give them a benefit of the doubt? I think we always say on our team, when you look at a resume that's very, very jumpy, often where there's smoke, there's fire, but that's not always the case.
Yeah. I mean, usually what I'm looking for is how they deal with really tough situations, right? Because a lot of people, they might have that consulting brain where they can point out what's wrong or what needs to happen, but they don't have that second part of like, I'm going to push through and make that change happen, right? And so I think with people like that, we're very energetic. They could also be, whatever you want to call it, naive, idealistic to some extent. Maybe they jump around because not every single situation is perfect. I mean, I'll even acknowledge that about myself. I could be a bit of like a person who wants everything to be perfect, ideal. So the second part then is getting into how they deal with tough situations, right? It's easy to stay at a company when it's just like ripping and going well, but how do you take that energy, and when you get that internal pushback, or when it doesn't land immediately, like, do you give up, or do you figure out how to iterate through it and question yourself, question your approach, and just like say, this is an important thing and I'm just going to keep at it until it gets done. So that would be like the second thing, right? They need to have energy and they need to have resilience.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And I suppose just for the folks that are listening, there are plenty of really talented people who I think just have accidentally gotten into a bad situation with a few different firms back to back, and they've hopped around a little bit, really no fault of their own. You've obviously been in a decision-making seat at two really, really successful businesses, ones that people want to join. What would be your advice to someone who has maybe just got the wrong end of the stick a few times with some businesses, and they're looking to get that long-term shot to join a company? And I guess what would your advice be when they're interviewing and when they're presenting themselves?
Yeah, be genuine, be honest, talk about like what you actually did wrong or would have done differently. Like I look for that a lot, just in general. So applies here and elsewhere. Is, can they own up to the mistakes that they made? Can they walk me through exactly why they made that decision and what they're doing differently about it? So there's a way of doing that. Like obviously some part of it is maybe you bought a bad batch of goods, right? The company completely missold itself or told you something else. But nonetheless, it reflects back on that person because they didn't dig deep enough. They didn't try to understand that business or that situation. So it's like, what have you done and changed since then in a very genuine, vulnerable way? That's what I look for.
For sure. And I think also as well, having some sense of accountability to their role in maybe that company not working out. I think a lot of people say, I joined this business and this is what happened and it went wrong. I joined this business and this is where they screwed up here. But maybe saying like, I joined this company, these were the goals, this is what happened. And while it was by no means perfect, I also contributed to that. I've learned a lot and now I'm looking to grow, kind of like a high EQ situation. Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
Maybe going back in time a little bit to Rubrik. So naturally, Silicon Valley technology, it's a very, very competitive marketplace. Talk to me about the hardest, the toughest hire that you've ever made and maybe like what you learned from it.
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to do it at Glean, even though I wasn't in recruiting, but it was a search that I helped run with the CEO. You mentioned salespeople. It was hiring a sales leader, for the overall sales leader. And so, one, salespeople are incredibly good at talking and talking about themselves. So I feel like the biggest thing that I learned was just how do you dig past that first wave? They're all going to know how to say roughly the same thing. And honestly, for us, we got to talk to the best of the best. So it's also like, it was almost overwhelming, how many good people we talked to. But it was really being able to dig into that second and third order, like problem solving ability and understanding of the business. Because they can often be more just the emotional leader, the people leader. But are they the type of person that can dig into the business every single day and make meaningful changes, whether it's the sales process, hiring, messaging, whatever is important when you're trying to operate a large go-to-market team that's growing very quickly. And so the biggest learning was just the importance of really figuring out how this person is going to problem solve tough challenges, right? Have they been used to someone else figuring it out for them? They not even approach these types of things, or are they the type of person that doesn't want to make changes, and so they benefited from other things in their position. So, from the outside, it looked like it was quite successful, but perhaps it could have been way better. They just were unwilling to make those changes. So it keeps going back to really that mindset of people who can constantly wake up every single day, say, what's the biggest problem that I need to be solving or identifying? And just continuously digging into that and improving it. And then figuring out how you get those signals, right? Whether it's through exercises that you do together in the interview process, whether it's through back channels or other things, just sifting through all that noise, so challenging.
And I would imagine working in AI or these just super innovative spaces where like the game that you're playing is very, very different 6 months at a time, because the technology evolves, the competition evolves, like there's so much change. And so in your review process, I'd imagine that screening for someone's ability to be a chameleon and have their kind of fundamental principles that they stick to over time, but also the ability to, if they need to, throw those all out the window and take on a whole new set of principles, right?
Yes. So in sales, there's a lot of conventional wisdom, right? That people constantly talk about, and it's been around for 20 years. And it's like, is that person even willing to question that, right? Are they just going to say, okay, I ran the same playbook 3 companies in a row, and now I'm going to come in and run the same playbook a 4th time? Like, I've seen people try to do that, and it really can ruin companies. So it's that first principles thinking is what's most important. Can you really get down to the root of what this company is trying to do? Then take what you understand about all the different kinds of approaches and then bridge the gap between the two. Especially in sales, there's quite a lot of people that come in and say, this thing worked for me at a different business, different stage. Doesn't matter. They throw all that out. It's like, it worked for me, so I'm going to assume it's going to work for me again. And it rarely does.
Yeah. It's super interesting. It reminds me of, I think when I first started in venture, one of the first books that I read was The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And I think Ben Horowitz talks about when he hired his head of sales and how he got like
Yeah.
10 or 15 referrals all from his network that were all like these very sexy, modern, adaptive sort of sales strategists. And then the person that interviewed that eventually got the job, he describes him in a very unflattering way. I think he sort of says he was like as tall as he was wide and wore old-fashioned suits and came in with like a binder that he went through, but then it was the best hire that he'd ever made, and the person absolutely killed it because they were so rooted in their principles, but also, I might be butchering the story, but able to adapt to the new business. You could probably speak more about that than I can.
Yeah. No, I mean, it definitely, I remember reading that book too. And a lot of times he mentioned, okay, I would ask a sales leader and they would say, oh, it was the go-to-market motion. It was the motion. They would kind of wave their hand, literally the epitome of hand waving and kind of high level. And what he really liked about that guy, every single problem, he could just dig in and say, I would do it this way for these reasons. Right. And that was a lot of, actually that motivated me quite a bit as far as I approached the interview process. Was like, I would rather just pick a few decisions that they made and just dig super deep on why they made that. What was their thinking throughout? What problems did they identify? What were the trade-offs that they thought through before they made that decision? So I often found that very powerful as a way to think about how does this person problem solve? And then I could add in an additional thing of, okay, well, here's a similar problem that we're facing here. Here's the context. Now, how would you go about approaching that? And so it gave me a really good sense for how it would work with this person to talk through problems. And I think that's what's so important, especially with sales leadership, even though so often it can be the person who's kind of like a nice talker, say, oh, it's all in the motion, and then never really dig into really deep details.
Fantastic. I suppose on the flip side of this, I've got another quote. I believe this is Ben Horace's actually second book, but it's not what you preach, it's what you tolerate. So talk to me about the red flags that you look for in interview processes.
I mean, honestly, I feel like I keep belaboring the same point, but most of the things that I look for are like the red flags for me are tied to the previous points of people who are good talkers, good interviewers, but I pick up the sense that they're not the people who dive in and do the work. So that's a less obvious red flag for me. And so much of it is about the way that they talk. I couldn't even give you like one specific, like kind of easy cue. But you can kind of pick up on it from, oh, did they see big problems but not run at them and say, oh, that's someone else's problem? That's another big red flag is people who have that mindset of, oh, that's not my problem. Oh, that's someone else's job, right? Especially at a startup. So it can be easy to see, or for people to develop that mentality, especially if they spent a lot of time at big companies where there's so many different teams that kind of pass the buck, play hot potato. And so one maybe less obvious red flag that I would look for is, does this person have that mentality of attacking problems and then figuring out whose responsibility it is afterwards? Or do they have the mentality of, oh, let me figure out how to try to pass this along to someone else, or get someone else to do the work for me, but they're just good at like the talking and interviewing piece.
Yeah, I like it. I think for just to bounce off what you said, especially running a recruitment company where a lot of people like fall into recruitment, you're probably a victim of that when you first joined Rubrik. I think it's a sense of knowing who you are and what job you're in and 100% committing to that. And I'd imagine whether it's sales or operations, like there are some people who are like, oh, I'm taking on this sales role right now, or I'm in sales right now, but my real goal is to get to operations or to strategy or whatever it might be. And as a result of that, they almost kind of like hopscotch the role that they're in, and they're kind of like, yeah, I'll do a good job in that position.
Yeah.
But it's just a sense of total focus and dedication to that specific craft, and being unbelievable at that, using that as a stepping stone to get and earn your right to get to the next piece. And for me, the way that shows up in interviews is, it's just like the small little details. Like, are they here 5 minutes before? when they do their presentation, are they pronouncing every stakeholder and the client correctly because they've listened to it online and they've done their research? Like, to your point, are they like dying to present to you and uncover a problem, or are they just kind of going through the routine? So that's some of the things. I don't know if that resonates.
Oh, for sure. No, I mean, it's so simplistic, but it's like the best way to get the job you want is oftentimes to show that the thing that you currently have, you can do really well on, right? But a lot of times people come in and say, okay, well, I'm trying to get there, so I'm constantly like neglecting some of my responsibilities in an attempt to make this move. And so it's almost like I remember someone talked about it, it's like learning versus doing. Sometimes you need to do more than just learn at a high level something else you want to get into. And so I think a lot of times people fall into that trap of like, okay, I'm going to learn many different things broadly in my attempt to move to this role, as opposed to this is my current job and I'm just going to be phenomenal at it. And I'll trust that the reward from that is that I actually get these other opportunities. And that's a cultural thing as well. Like the culture has to be set up in a way where you reward the right things.
For sure. On the flip side, again, we're kind of bouncing around, but we work in renewable energy and it's such a candidate-driven market. When you have an A player, they usually know they're an A player. When you're sitting across the table from somebody who's fielding offers from the top 5, top 10 AI businesses, everybody wants them, or maybe, analogous companies.
Yeah.
What's your approach to getting them on board? Do you have any specific tactics in closing A players?
Yeah. So I remember at Rubrik, we competed a lot with companies like Google, Facebook, others that bigger name, bigger brand, typically more cash. When it came to salary and equity, closing starts from the very first call, right? And what I always would focus on was like, you have to get people to have that perspective of like making a decision independent of money, right? It's like money matters in the short term a lot of times too much to people because they can feel like, oh, this company's not valuing me enough. Or if we're being honest, like it's fun to brag, especially with engineers, like fun to brag to your friends, like, oh, I make more money than you, blah, 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 right? So like those big companies, they understand that and they use that as an advantage. And in the first call, you talk about all these things that the person wants as far as growth, autonomy, responsibility. And then you're at the end and all you're talking about is salary and equity and things like that. And those are important. But if you're comparing with a completely different type of company, like the skill is to snap them back into what's really important, which you should have figured out at a different point in time before the recruiter at the big company whose only game is money churned it into the main decision criteria. So often it's trying to create like the perspective that will come with time, being like, okay, if you look back on your life 20 years from now, is making 20 or even 50K more going to be the thing that you will say, oh, I'm really glad I made that decision based on that? Or will your decision be based on something else? So, that wasn't like one specific thing, but it's like the strategy of using time as the ultimate way to help someone get perspective. I think Jeff Bezos talks about this a lot, which is like the decisions of imagine you're 80 and looking back on your life, right? And so when you try to make decisions that way, it can put a lot of things in perspective. And so that's ultimately the goal as far as what I'm trying to close someone is like, we talked about all these things at a different point in time, and I think we can offer you those. And the equity or like the money will come, but the most important thing is, ideally, if it's the right person, is like the learning and the ability to do, right? And so obviously as a startup, we generally have that advantage over bigger companies. So you're just trying to bring it back to that.
Something that you told me actually in Mexico a few months ago, which I've very much stolen because I just thought the way that you phrased it was just so good, is you get your candidate, maybe when they're getting a little bit more serious, it's like a pre-close call, and you can obviously put this much earlier, but you just say, look, let's just completely put money to the side. and talk about the options that you have. Tell me why you might want to join us. Tell me why you might want to join a competitor. And then you basically walk through all of the reasons why your option is a good one. But I love that idea. And also to what you mentioned, it really resonated, and it reminds me of something one of my mentors told me. He's brilliant. He's this older English guy, and he's had a tremendous amount of success in recruiting in technology actually. But the way that he kind of sells people to come work for him is he says, when you look back on your life, similar to what you mentioned with Jeff Bezos, when you look back on your life, there are going to be certain eras that are kind of your golden eras. Maybe it's like whatever, the sports team that you played on in college or in high school, and it was you and the guys or the girls, and it was that kind of journey that you were on together, and it really mattered, and the hard work didn't seem so tough, and it was that kind of that golden era of your life. My goal as a director of this business is to do everything possible to make this the golden era of your career. Yes, you'll earn great money. Yes, you'll be working with some cool companies, but you'll wake up every day and it will be basically us against our competition, and we want to get after them. We want to win. And that journey together, that competition, is something that, as you mentioned, you'll look back on and when you're older, and regardless of all the money and all that stuff, you won't remember it because it will be the golden era. And I just think the way he puts it is epic.
Oh, I love that. I mean, I still look back, same thing at Rubrik, not a super sexy space to be in, but it's like, I think back on those first 4 or 5 years and like the way that we banded together and competed against all of them. It was just such a wonderful time. And that's so much more valuable. I mean, obviously ended up doing quite well from a company perspective, but we didn't know that at the time. It was just the excitement and the thrill of doing that together.
Yeah, I mean, it also, I can go on forever with these quotes, but I just finished Never Enough by Andrew Wilkinson over at Tiny, and he talks about being involved with the upper echelons of society, the billionaires and things like that, and he says how all of the billionaires and the people who have just absolutely made it, the reason why they keep starting companies over and over and over again, yes, they're entrepreneurs and all the rest of it, but almost like a heroin addict, they're chasing that feeling again of being a part of the rocket ship, of like, maybe this is the next one, maybe this is the next one. And so money literally is to the side because they have too bloody much of it, and they're in search of that again.
It's real. I mean, obviously I'm not in that, but even just from spending a year plus when I was traveling, taking sabbatical and coming back, it's like, I'm not drawn to the idea of retirement and doing nothing. Like, I'm drawn to the idea of waking up and competing every day. I think some people are just wired like that, and it doesn't matter. Like, the money doesn't affect it. I think it's such a vital thing to actually nurture. Like, society is always talking about, this idea of like retiring and doing whatever. Like, the rat race is bad if the goal is just like, the bad parts of it, right? But it's so wonderful if it's about coming together as a team to do something special and creating something that you feel like needs to exist. Like that is energizing.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's fun, right? And it makes you significant. It helps you beat your competition. Again, I'm going on long on the books, but I'm rereading Naval Ravikant, and he's basically like, the reason why I smoke my competition is because for me it's not work, it's fun. So when I wake up, like it's not like, I'm putting in a hard shift. It's like I like doing this, and you're going to lose because for me it's just it's fun, it's play.
The CEO here, he's like that too. I think people ask him all the time because he was the co-founder at Rubrik. Obviously did quite well. He was early at Google, and he's just like, I love work. It's the most fun thing for me. And I think some people don't always understand it, but yeah, some people are just wired that way.
Let's talk about recruiting and your journey in that field. So I think that, to my earlier point, even though there are many really, really passionate recruiters, I think often a lot of people will take a path in recruiting to get through to operations, to get through to strategy, to get into that kind of maybe less sort of sales focused role. What was your kind of secret sauce when you were at Rubrik to be such an effective recruiter? You added, well over 150 people to that team, which is no easy feat, obviously with some really high quality people. What was your secret sauce in being so good in recruiting? And then what was the sort of like the main mindset shift when you went over to strategy and product?
So actually the one thing you didn't mention, I was actually an engineer before I went to Rubrik. So I spent 1 year was doing some electrical design and writing some low-level C programming. So it was kind of an insane shift to go from that
Wow.
to recruiting. So there was also an element for me where it was like, I have no choice. Like I have to, I have to make this thing happen, because like what I did was just kind of insane in hindsight. Like at that time I joined because I thought that the team at Rubrik was so wonderful. And here's the thing, they actually said, come here and do well and you'll have opportunities to go do something else. So to some extent I was actually driven by the fact that I have to do this thing well because I made this change, and I have to do this thing well because it can open up a lot of other opportunities. I wasn't certain that recruiting was going to be the thing that I would be in forever. I had a lot of other interests. I enjoy learning new things. So for me, it was the fact that I got to do something completely new. I got to work with people like Bipul is the CEO, and then Arvind, he's the CEO here at Glean, and was one of the other co-founders. I mean, it was great for me. I got to meet people that probably wouldn't have. So it was enough to keep me energized and excited. And then just building the team, seeing the kind of impact that bringing in an engineer who maybe was at Google but wasn't able to do truly great work there, seeing them come in at Rubrik and contribute so much to the product, that kept me energized. Mindset shift going to product, I think there were a lot. It was, the biggest one was just going back to, I don't know anything. I need to learn as quickly as possible. And I think the thing that's probably served me well throughout all these, you'll kind of see the common theme is just come in, start as a blank slate, and try to learn and be a sponge. Like I'm very fascinated just with the general idea of learning. Like people talk about, oh, children learn languages faster than adults. Like in reality, adults should learn things much faster than children. And they did a bunch of research on this. And the reason that children learn so quickly is they have no ego. They have no fear of making mistakes. They have no fear of asking dumb questions. So like, that's why children learn so quickly. So if you can adopt that as an adult with all the other things, you should actually be able to learn much, much faster. And so that was generally what I did. I had a great mentor there, who took me on the product teams. I could bug him and ask him all sorts of questions. But yeah, the mindset shift was, doesn't matter what you've done, you're now starting completely new, and you have to prove yourself again, and you have to learn as quickly as possible. So that was it.
Yeah, lot to unpack again. And I mean, in sales and recruiting, you can have the techniques, you can have, some of the things we talked about in relation to closing and all of that, but I love what you said, and it sounded like you really had tapped into your why. You had left behind a very technical career in engineering, although I'd argue recruiting is extremely technical, but arguably you don't get degrees in recruiting like you might do in engineering. But anyway, you left behind a career, and you also had the carrot of like, if you ace this, the sky's the limit in terms of what you could achieve here. So there was a real fuel to the fire to get things done, and we talk about that a lot with new hires. It's find your why as quickly as you can. That's something we can't coach you, and it's going to be the thing that gets you up every morning to just absolutely dominate the day. And your motivation is no longer about pleasing your boss, it's about you achieving your goals, and everything else, just you get into that flow state. So that's awesome. And one of my favorite books, is Mindset, Carol Dweck, but the growth mindset thing I think is so underrated. It's like the balance of having confidence in what you do know, but also the beginner's mindset to always kind of head into a conversation or whatever it might be with a sense that you could learn a whole new range of skills. And I'd imagine that was obviously huge getting into strategy. So,
oh, for sure. Yeah, I guess to a large extent it makes very little sense that I've been able to do the things that I've done. I don't think there's that many people who go from like recruiting to this type of path, but yeah, just don't underestimate the power of like what you can do if you just say, I can be good at it. I remember seeing even in high school, people who it's especially like an American thing, like, oh, I'm not good at math. I can't be good at math. Like, yes, you can. There is no secret to any of it. You just have to like do it and persevere and learn and go through it. And so as long as you have that mindset, like, yeah, I can do this, I can figure it out. I'm not gonna mentally stop myself. I think it's truly incredible the various things you can learn and do.
Yeah, and humans are obviously so dynamic, and labeling yourself as an introvert or an extrovert or good at math, good at English or whatever it is, like of course you have your natural talents, but you can change with enough effort in certain areas. And there might be people who are super introverted but extroverted in other situations, and all the rest of it. It's just so situation dependent and where your motivation comes from. I think that's awesome. What do you think has been the hardest thing to pick up as it relates to, well, it's been a while now, but what was the hardest thing that you had to pick up on the product side and learning that whole side of the business and getting into strategy?
Yeah. So there were a few different ones. When I first made the change into product at Rubrik, it was a very technical product still. So just learning that and learning enterprise sales and go to market, right? So I talk a lot about, it's hard to be really good at product if you don't understand the other piece of how is it going to get sold and how does it get to whoever is your end user. And that's usually where people can run into a lot of problems, from product, is you're so isolated from the rest of that system, because they're the system from how you actually build it to how it gets to the person. And if you don't really understand that deeply, you can end up building products that are just sort of in an echo chamber, if you will, right? It's very disconnected from what your customers or users need. And so that was one big thing where I had to really understand the other half of the business. Like, how do they go about selling the product? Who they sell it to? What are those people looking for? So that's one thing, when talk about strategy, I think strategy comes from how do both R&D and go to market work well together, at least like in the world that I live in, B2B enterprise software, right? The two are so intertwined that figuring out how one affects the other is something that I've spent a lot of time trying to learn and better understand. Again, it was something that I saw Bipple, who was the CEO at Rubrik. He did that incredibly well. And so I never forgot the importance of that other side, right? And really understanding their world and their day-to-day.
Yeah, I think it's analogous to recruiting as well. I think that you can sometimes obsess over your own internal systems and how you might attract candidates and clear them and prepare them and things like that. And yet you may disregard what the client actually wants and the service that the end user actually needs. And like having a really intrinsic set of principles in terms of what's good and what's bad is important, but also being able to pivot and adapt very quickly with a low ego when the end user is wanting something different, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I see that all the time. It's like you're focused on, okay, how do you schedule candidates? But are you spending enough focus on the people who actually do the interviews to make sure they know what they're looking for? They ask the questions in the right types of ways, the right types of questions. Like that often gets overlooked, which is usually far more important than the process, or like that secondary process, if you will.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier on, but like it's crazy because we are obsessed with process. How many times we can run a really slick process, we find the right candidate, we get them in, and then you might get to the offer, and the simple question of does this new career actually solve for their aspiration and pain points has not been answered. And as a result of that, you could be an A player on process management, but if the basics aren't there, it's like, okay. Fantastic. So, Neboysa, last question I have for you. I'm going to finish with another quote. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. That one's from Alvin Toffler. With that said, how do you future-proof your hiring decisions when you're building teams in emerging spaces like AI?
I feel like that quote captures it so well. I mean, it really is like, I talk a lot about learning, curiosity. The only way to future-proof is a combination of mindset and ability to learn. Like, are they the type of people where, and you're actually starting to see this, for example, with like AI, right? Where you see the younger generation is so good at using Chat GPT, whereas without getting myself into trouble, other folks aren't adopting it nearly as quickly. right? And the only way that you can continue through this is like you have that almost like childlike wonder, and you just want to figure out how these new things work. Like I see so much of the resistance to change at other companies is just because people get set in their patterns, right? Something worked for them, or they learn for long enough and they're like, okay, I've reached a certain level now and I think this can just carry me through. And with AI today, I think it's going to upend a lot of that. And the main way to future proof is to find people who still have who have that childlike wonder and curiosity and energy and ability to learn, because we don't know what it holds, but whatever it is, it's going to require people to keep adapting and not lose that energy, not lose that curiosity, or start to think they know everything.
Love it. Fantastic. Sounds like in the world of AI and innovation and all that kind of stuff, ironically, the mindset and the soft skills and how people are attacking that is going to be the most important thing versus the technical deep dive.
Sure.
Awesome.
For sure.
Neboysa, you're the best. I love what you're doing, mate. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me, and I'm sure we'll chat soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Seb.